Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Managing Hazardous Waste webinar. I'm going to talk slowly here to give a few more minutes for folks to join us. But in the meantime, I'd just like to remind everyone that our next webinar will be coming up on December 7th. That's going to be our medical surveillance requirements presentation, where Lacia will be telling us how to identify custom medical surveillance needs for your organization using detailed hazard exposure information. So keep an eye out for an email that we'll be sending out after today's presentation. There's going to be a link in there for you to register for that upcoming webinar. Okay, today we're going to be talking about hazardous waste. Now, normally we'd have Lisa, a member of our professional services team, here to introduce us and help move us along. Unfortunately, she's not feeling well today, and we decided to spare her voice. So please send her some healing thoughts and bear with me as I do my best Lisa impersonation. Lacia Matarisi is here with us too. She'll be monitoring our Q&A. We'll tell you more about that function in just a minute. I am Kimmy Brown. I'm a product engineer, and as you'll hear me talk about later, I also have previous experience in environmental health and safety. Bill Kalinich, though, is the star of the show today. He is a systems engineer. He'll be walking us through all the good stuff the hazardous waste module has to offer. Just some quick housekeeping before we get going. Like I said, there is a Q&A tool here in Zoom webinars. So you can submit your questions there throughout the presentation. We have held some time at the end to discuss those. You may see Lacia respond to some questions as we go along. She'll also let Bill and I know if there are any questions that we should save to discuss at the end. So do notice that when you are posting your questions in the Zoom Q&A, you'll have the option to send that to just us, the hosts, or you can share your question with all the participants for everyone to see. So I just wanted to point that out in case you want to choose who your audience is for those questions. Okay, lastly, just a reminder, we are recording this presentation, and we will be sharing a link to that recording in the email that you'll receive afterwards. All right, with that, I'm going to stop sharing my slides here, and we'll let Bill get started with today's topic.
All right, thanks, Kimmy.
Yeah.
Excited to be here for our webinar. I'll be focused on the hazardous waste module today. We have a mixed audience of folks. We have people that are currently using the module and people that are interested in the module as well. So we're going to go over some of the capabilities that the module has to offer. So we'll be going over different components, some standard features. So if you're starting with implementation or anything along those lines, or you see something that's new, we might be able to turn that on for you as well. So we'll be going through the module a little bit different. We're going to start as an end user and then work our way to EHS. And of course, we'll always be happy to schedule more traditional demonstrations for you if you're interested in a complete overview before we just dive in today.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I have been looking forward to talking with you today about how this module is helping our customers to manage their waste programs. Now, of course, I'm familiar with how it works from the technical standpoint, but you have kind of a more personal connection to how all this works in the real world because you used to be one of those like has waste guys, right?
Yeah, so right out of college, I actually got my first job up here in Boston, and I used to the guy pushing the cart around and picking up the waste, managing the pickup requests for a few different organizations. And different places had different ways of doing things. Kind of felt like a ice cream man in reverse, pushing the cart around, people putting things on my cart, and I'd be taking them around. So it'd be pretty cool, but I learned a lot and learned a lot from different universities, companies, industry, hospitals. So we tried to combine a lot of that information.
Yeah, and that's what you did when you came here to work with SciShield, right? So can you tell us a little about the origin story of how this module came about? Because you were heavily involved in that.
Yeah, so we were in discussions with a few of our customers about this anyway. And we actually went to a waste conference to learn more about that. I ran into a bunch of my former colleagues as well. So we had a bunch of conversations, kind of sat around, had a couple of beers, wings, because we were in Buffalo at the Has Waste conference, some burgers, and we had some really good discussions about how we could make this a really standardized approach that would work at multiple universities. So that's where the idea of the Hazardous Waste modules came about.
Yeah, we love learning from our communities, what challenges we can help them to solve. And some of those best ideas sometimes happen over, beers and wings and burgers, or, in my case, sometimes some of my worst ideas do, but we don't need to talk about that. Let's focus a little more on what you were trying to accomplish when you started developing this.
Yeah, so we really just wanted to standardize the process. We wanted to have one less place that people needed to go, one less thing that people needed to be trained on. And at the end of the day, everyone has waste and compliance needs. So the module gives customers the opportunity to keep everything related to health and safety underneath one roof. And that's really our goal, just increase that one-stop shop mentality. And this led us to work with different groups, who have vendors on site, to really provide that level of service for them as well.
Yeah. And when you were talking earlier about your experience doing this, you mentioned something about this, but different organizations really do handle their waste pickups in different ways, right? So what are some of those different methods you've seen for how people manage those requests when they don't have a module like we're going to look at today?
Yeah, so really, it's a really broad spectrum. So I've seen things like phone calls, emails that come through, even faxes, having to print papers out in interoffice mail, or just people coming around with a cart. So there's a lot of disjointed ways that people operate those, which takes a lot of work to manage. So on the sites, or if you're putting in a waste request, you kind of getting a mixed bag of information that's sent your way. So having that being standardized and creating that level of consistency allows for things like not duplicate of submissions, allows that for less burden on the health and safety team, and also less burden and making it easier for the laboratory as well too. So if they find it easy, they're going to make the proper requests as well. So having everything in one system just allows us to see that compliance can all be in one place.
Yeah, that's pretty huge. And I know like people need to go to one place for their training and their inspections and their registrations, their other safety tasks, and then they have to go somewhere else entirely to manage their hazardous waste. That can be pretty confusing. In my experience, people in the labs really seem to appreciate when they don't have to remember which different portal to go to for different tasks. And especially when you're dealing with turnover in people, you then have to continually train those new folks on where to go for which actions. Well, okay, Bill, I think it gives us a pretty good introduction to this. So thank you for that background. How about you share your screen now and we can show the people what they came here to see.
Great.
Yeah, we'll turn off our cameras, focus on your screen.
All right. So right now, I'm logged in as Renato Adams. He's an end user of the system. So usually when we log into the system, we're able to see information that might be affecting us as well too. Right? Training information, some of our other areas that we might need attention on. And we already know the platform gives us a ton of information about our spaces and other areas as well too that are going to allow us to make things easier for the pickup. The goal of the module is not only removing the barriers, but also make things easier and more straightforward for the end user. But
yeah, so Bill, let's pretend I'm Renato Adams. Okay, so I'm this person you're logged in as right now. Where am I going to go if I want to see what's up with my current waste requests, or if I want to make a new pickup request?
yeah, so it's a nice, easy link for them as well too, to be able to dive in here. And by clicking into the lab profile, we would see a link for us to be able to dive into complete a waste pickup request here. So the user will be able to see their waste summary. So they'll be able to see things like past pickup requests that they've made as well. They'll also be able to see information about their waste streams that they have that are associated to them, and the pending waste pickup requests that they have as well too.
Hey, Bill, let's go back up to those waste streams that you mentioned. We should probably take a beat here just to talk about what that is and why those are such a key benefit in this module.
Yeah, the profiles are created by health and safety. They're pre-assigned to groups specifically or commonly used waste streams that can help really organize the pickup requests for the team as well too. So they're pre-filled out and they allow for information such as chemicals, hazards, notes from the pickup request to populate when submitting. the request as well. So that way we can really guide the user. And this can really increase the conversations that we're having with the waste generators about what they're producing and what they're making in the lab. So we have actually better visibility to see additional risks that we're not aware of during the inspection or during making a hazard assessment as well.
Yeah, could you click into one of those so we could take a look at one of those pickups of a profile?
Sure. So let's dive into the organic solvent one here. From there.
Yeah, so just to be clear, these waste stream profiles, this is going to be a way to predetermine common types of wastes and mixtures of waste so that the generators don't need to keep listing out all of those constituents each time they want that same stuff to be hauled away. And this sounds like one of those really nice time-saving shortcuts that everyone loves, but I've heard you say this can help with waste minimization and sustainability too, right?
Yeah, exactly. By us being able to pull into that information, being able to see what they have, it can also help with pulling that information together so they don't have to actually provide that to us for the pickup request. But this can also cut down on trips we might need to take, maybe waste that's going to cost us a lot. We want to make sure that it's compatible and guide the laboratory groups into putting in the proper materials into the proper containers. That way that we can know that we can combine some things or send them for reclaiming or recycling instead of end disposal, which makes things really easy for the common waste that needs to be removed on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's good for safety too. But, Bill, it's research, right? So some of the procedures and outputs are common and can be defined like this, but so many of the things that are happening in the lab are novel or even one-time procedures. So how does that work then if a group has a different kind of waste that doesn't fall within one of these predefined waste stream profiles that's been assigned to them?
Yeah, of course, they can always come in and submit a new chemical waste pickup request here, but they're gonna have to fill out a bit more information. We're not gonna know all that materials and constituents already, but we're gonna know some things about their location because of the platform and who's making the request as well. So we're just gonna provide a little bit more information and a little more guidance into what they would be submitting for that as well.
Great. So this is the pickup request, either a profile or a one-off, but I'm going to switch gears on you now and going to ask you to take a look at this from the health and safety team member perspective instead of from the lab member who's making the pickup request.
Absolutely. So now we're going to log in as a hazardous waste manager here, or a member of the EHS team, Roger O'Neill. So he's going to have a little bit of a different view. But let's dive into that laboratory to take a look at what he can see as well.
While you're doing that, I'll just say a little bit about my own experience in health and safety. Unlike Bill, I was not the waste guy, but I did do general lab inspections, and that included looking over the waste accumulation areas to make sure everything was safe and in compliance. And I don't know why, maybe it was because people felt like they needed to purge their labs before the inspection. But it was not uncommon for me to see during those inspections an excess amount of waste piling up in the accumulation area. Often there'd be more containers than what fit in their secondary containment bins, or like things literally stacked on top of other containers. So Bill, with that example in mind, could you kind of talk to us about how this hazardous waste module could assist the lab inspector in a situation like that?
Yeah, exactly. So, when you're coming in and you want to see something that might be waste is piling up is definitely a red flag for our lab inspection. So something can either be marked as a finding that we don't want to be marked as a finding. We might not have that communication with the people that handle the waste to know that they actually made the request or it's been submitted already. We have to take their word for it that they submitted that, right? So if an email is sent to a colleague that's on vacation or to a central area, that inspector would maybe never know because of different communication is not centralized. So having the one-stop shop, the inspector could go take a look at a lab's waste summary before inspecting, or take a look at their waste queue to actually help them out.
Gotcha. So the inspector's got that same view of the information that the lab group does. But how about that perspective of the person who is managing the waste pickups? What are they going to be looking for when they come into here?
Yeah, so they'll be able to come into their pickup request queue. They can also receive an email about that as well. So they can actually plan their day a little bit. So they can filter by group information, the profile that they may be looking for, or a specific building that there is as well too. So they can actually plan their day in real time as things are coming through, and make that a little bit easier rather than having to go back and print out emails. We can also do that from a close request pickup item as well, where we can see all our past requests also.
Yeah, I can see that would be really helpful so that you wouldn't have to print things out or kind of sit down and plan your day. You could just kind of go out, move around the building, move around campus, and understand where the needs were in different locations.
That's right. It makes it a lot easier because you get this in real time. You have visibility, compliance, and organization. You have reduction of printing and time spent planning your day, or your vendors' time planning their day as well too, based off those printouts and emails. So that visibility of the history of requests, we can also dive back if there's been a problem. With this, everything's electronic. It's in one place, and all the history is saved. So we can actually make good decisions about things as well.
Very nice. But I do think we all know that just because someone has asked you to come and pick up their waste, it is not always possible to complete the request, and that can sometimes lead to confusion. Another issue that I'm familiar with from my time in EHS, I sometimes get a message from a lab saying that they asked for their waste to be picked up like last week, but it's still in their lab. And then I'd look into it, and then it turns out the environmental health techs had tried to do the pickup, but they couldn't complete it because there was a labeling problem or a container that was uncapped. If no one was in the lab at the time and they couldn't offer that explanation of what the issue was, the waste would just sit there and the issue wouldn't get corrected. So that's a problem. Can you show us what can be done about that here in the waste module?
For sure. So we can actually mark those and send them a notification about that as well too. So we'll see those items as being rejected. We can actually dive in and find out why. So we can actually pull up that information. And so we couldn't remove this item because the laser light was on. So the lab can correct this and revise it and send it back. Or if we come walk by again and correct that, we can revise it and close it out.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, earlier we talked about all those other ways that research organizations might be managing their waste pickups, and those things, those phone calls and emails, they're not really going to have a place to track all this feedback and the status of all the requests, and especially those rejected ones. So I do really like this transparency that it provides between those waste generators and the people doing the pickups. So here we are, we're looking into one of those revised requests right now, right?
Yep. So this one has been, let's dive into the revised request here. So we can actually see, how they actually corrected this one as well. If they left this information and notes about this also, and we can provide other information on there. So we can actually take a look at any of those requests that we want to, and dive into more information, help them fill that out, or correct and resubmit. So we can actually see the hazards. If they didn't fill out that information, we can actually ask them to do that or do that on their behalf.
Hey, but while we're here, I see that there is a section here for waste codes on this form. Now, is that something that the lab has to define? Because I think sometimes that's actually the responsibility of someone else, like the vendor, to do that, right?
Yeah, so this is actually a configurable field. So we can turn this on or off for customers, but it basically would be only for, it's permission-based as well. So it would really only be about the folks that would need to be, or would have to do the coding at the end as well. So it's pretty easy. We can do drag and drop, or we can do command and click if we have different ones also, and then take those off. So we can move those around. We can add different codes. We can also import your state or local municipality codes as well too.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that. Someone did ask about that in the registration, that for selecting multiple ones. So just to emphasize that, you can click and drag to highlight those, or you can use command or control and click on multiple ones to select and deselect those individually. So thanks for pointing that out. And I see here there is a way to request supplies as well.
Yeah, so this is also configurable. So we can turn this on or off this field, depending if you provide supplies back to the groups. But with that, we can also configure what you're providing back to them as well. So just a way for them to communicate what they might need from you if you do provide those supplies.
Yeah, that's great, because that's going to be different everywhere, right? So what about the requests that are successfully picked up? You can easily mark those as closed, right?
Yep, so you can dive in, you can edit those pickup requests and mark them as closed, or we can actually just make multi-select. So if we were to know we're in the Adams laboratory today, we got everything that they've selected, we can just close those requests in bulk, or we can do them one by one.
Right, and then you can view the ones after they've been closed as well. Yeah,
Correct, yeah, so you can dive into closed pickup request queue and find that information in there.
great. So before we wrap up here, while we're logged in as the health and safety person, I want to go back to setting up the waste stream profiles. Can you show us what that looks like?
Sure. So that's going to be very similar to how people will actually build up a waste request anyway. So we can add the constituents, the other information that would be in here, if there's applicable waste codes, the hazards. So it just makes it really easy for us to then pull that information together and provide that to the groups that would be working with this material. So we can actually see that information as well too. So we can dive into those other areas here within our Piranha group, and we can actually find, let's say there's an accident or incident, what other groups are actually using this profile. So we can actually go talk with them, maybe do a retrain if there's a problem as well.
That's great. I think the one last view that we should look at here as the health and safety team person is that list of waste generators.
Yeah, so this is what we wanted to do here was really make the waste request something that was also going to help the program, right? So they're just coming into emails or coming into other information about that. It's going to provide us with the information we want to see that we can actually look into. We are going to know our heavy hitters. We're going to know the people that are going to produce a ton of waste that we're always talking to, that we're always going to. But we want to see also is maybe the groups that aren't, right? So we can actually see, are they still working with these materials? Are their waste profiles still applicable? Maybe we want to look into their chemical inventory or have a discussion with them, or at the worst, they're just accumulating waste within their labs.
Yeah, the hazardous waste module, this has been available for, I think, about 5 years now. It's not our newest edition, but we are still getting the word out about it. And I know when I'm asked about this, like at a conference or during a demo, I'm guilty of sometimes just saying, yeah, it's a way to manage waste pickup requests. And it is, that's true. But as you've been showing us, there are all these additional benefits you get just folding another process into SciShield here with everything else. Because this is like driving the users to log in, because they have to do that to make these requests. And that's putting their other requirements, the reminders, their announcements in front of them more often. That's beneficial. It's giving the health and safety teams a way to guide the waste generators on what materials can be safely combined into a single waste stream with those waste stream profiles. And it's saving those generators time and submitting those requests. And the waste team benefits from that easier organization, their logistics, along with that increased visibility to the other health and safety staff. So not to mention, I do love that transparency and communication between the generators and the people doing the pickups.
Right. So it's just one less silo of information, right? It opens up the safety view for everybody to really have that level of transparency as well. So if you're interested in learning more about the module, please feel free to reach out to our support or respond to the email we sent to you with the webinar recording.
Yeah, and also for those of you who are already licensing this, because I know we do have some people in the webinar today who are using it. If you want to review your configuration options, you can also reply to that follow-up email, and someone from our customer engagement team will be in touch to go through those with you.
Great. So that's all I have to show for you today for the Hazardous Waste module. So Kimmy, we'll kick it back over to you.
Yeah, sure. If you want to stop sharing your screen, we can put our lovely faces back up here and in video. Thanks for that, Bill. I will share my screen again quickly just to mention that, let me hit share, that helps. Just to mention again, another quick plug for our upcoming medical surveillance webinar. It's coming up in a few weeks on December 7th. That one will be starting at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, you can register for that by clicking in the link in the email you'll be receiving after we wrap up today. So if you do have time to stick around for a few more minutes, we will be answering some questions now that were submitted during registration. And if there are any from the Q&A feature in Zoom. But if you do have to sign off now, you can find out what you missed by checking out the recording, which will also be in our follow-up email. Okay, Bill, first, we have a few questions from the registration. So two people, I believe, had questions regarding the use of barcoding with the hazardous waste module. Now, I know we haven't built anything specifically to support barcoding, but is there anything you'd like to say with regard to that?
Yeah, I think we'd be interested in learning more about how people would like to use that, how they would plan to use that, and how it would support their system. So feel free to let us know, and we can have a conversation about that.
Yeah, thanks. We invite that kind of feedback. It's not something
Absolutely.
we've heard a lot about, but always interested to learn more there. There was also a question about tracking SAAs or satellite accumulation areas.
Yeah, so we can actually do that within our equipment module. We can actually track the total volume or the secondary container. We could track the type of waste that would be allowed in there. So if people have a reference point, if they're looking at what they could put into that container. And that also allows us to put them onto audits where we can actually share the responsibility. So if there is a state regulation or municipality regulation that enforces that all of the SAAs be inspected on a weekly basis, we can actually give the lab or members some responsibilities in those regards to manage those as well, keep track of that. So just utilizes a lot of great functionality that we have within the equipment module.
Yeah, if for those that aren't familiar with the equipment module, if you're interested in learning more about that and how it relates to satellite accumulation areas, let us know. It's, you can tie things to groups, to locations, and also allow for that auditing. So it's really nice. Okay, we had a few different questions related to other types of waste besides strictly hazardous chemical waste, things like radioactive, mixed waste, and biological waste. Can you talk about how our customers are managing those?
Yeah, so we do handle RAD waste within the RAD module as well. It'll actually pull from their inventory and help keep that managed pretty well. And it will provide a more of a RAD kind of focused pickup request as well. But we have seen people use those profiles to actually manage or create like a red box or certain types of other labels that they want to put on that as generic labels or adding in other materials to those pickup requests, which will allow that to be managed by those profiles. So you can actually sort those in the sort those in the pickup request queue, which would allow you to focus solely on those as well.
Great. Okay. I think this is the last one from the registration questions. Someone also asked about tracking weights for generator status and a compliance calendar. I think we talked about that a little bit recently. So before you answer this, can you say a little bit about what is meant by that for people like me who didn't immediately recognize what was meant by compliance calendar?
Yeah, so there are going to be dates that you're going to need to ship out from your MAAs, and then you might have multiple of them as well. So knowing that they're coming up, so you can get ready for your shipment, talk to your vendor, talk to your people that are going to actually be pulling the waste from your MAA, sorry, from that area as well, so that way you can prepare for it or send them the information. So if you can actually extract that information from our system, you can provide them with that information ahead of time, so they actually know what's coming for them as well. So that's how a compliance calendar would help out with those type of items there. And
Because you can filter by the dates of the requests, right?
exactly. So you can filter by those dates of your close request, and you can send that information to them as well. So it just provides a little bit more like that detail for there.
But nothing right now for tracking the weights of the generator status.
Not at the moment right now for the generator status. This is something we're hearing a little bit more of as well. A lot of times we were working with a lot of larger groups that had vendors that would primarily take care of a lot of that information for them or provide that with them. As we've been expanding and getting more traction within different communities, we're hearing that come up a little bit more. So it's something we're actually interested in to learn more about of how we can help out in those areas.
Okay, great. Well, since I am terrible at multitasking, I've been completely ignoring the Q&A. So hopefully, Lacia, you've been keeping an eye on that for us. Is there anything happening there that you would like to offer up to us?
Yeah, we've had a couple of questions about reporting on waste that has been picked up. And this is something that, Bill, I might cue you up to share your screen again, just to show the completed waste pickup requests view so that
Okay.
folks can see how they would find what has been picked up and how they might find information about total volumes and hazards for a specific time frame also. Let's say if they wanted to say, what did we do last year or last quarter?
Okay, just give me 1 second here. I'll be ready for you. Okay, 1 second. Oh, sorry, can I get steal screen from you?
Oh, yeah, I can give that up. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All yours.
Okay, so we can actually filter by those different request dates. I'm sorry, let me go to close pickup requests here. So if we're looking for a particular profile or a department or information that's coming out of different areas also, we can also filter by different dates of when things are coming in or out, when they've been requested before or requested after. So we actually manage those from here. So if we're curious about a specific building, we can actually pull that information out from there and pull that out from our Excel file here as well too. So we can have the view as well as manipulating that information as we see fit with multiple filters.
And that export will include a lot of information about the hazard classification and the component parts of that, the constituents rather, of the waste pickup, right?
Correct. It's not just what we're seeing on the screen. It's going to be all the details that are behind the scenes as well too. Hazards, supplies, anything that you're curious about would be in there.
Thanks, Bill. One of the other common questions I'm seeing that you've somewhat already addressed with the discussion about barcoding is just generally labeling of waste, labeling the containers and within satellite accumulation areas also.
Yeah, so that's been something we've always discussed as well too on a lot of the demos. And it's a little tricky, right? Because as you're building up the waste, you still have to label on the container. So with the profiles, it might work if we were to kind of print those out or anything like that as well. But different states and different types of organizations have different needs. So it can be a little bit tricky to match all of those specifically. So if there's a really standardized approach that would work a lot of places, we could talk about that. It's also a little bit tricky with printers and other kinds of other areas of how that would work. So it gets a little bit site specific for us to be able to kind of print those out. But hopefully what we can do as they're filling out that waste request is actually guide them on the proper way to fill it out. So as you saw, the constituents are all full names. The hazards are all there for them. So it's going to be a little bit more of like hopefully a training exercise of how they would fill out that actual tag itself. So it can be a little bit tricky to do a little bit of labeling side of things, but it'd be pretty cool, but it's a little tricky at the moment.
Thanks, Bill. How about the question of time? So things can't sit around forever. It becomes unstable over time sometimes, and things can degrade. How can folks best manage containers that have been around for a while and might be approaching their holding limits?
Yeah, so there's some places have like a 3-day, some of I've seen a 10-day limit. So we can actually see the date of requests as they come in, so we can organize it by that as well too. So typically we can manage those by filtering right here and organizing and sorting the materials that we have.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Now, one of these questions is a little bit over my head, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of a curveball here. Hazardous waste determinations. Do you have a process for doing something like that?
So the end user can make the determinations about the types of hazards that they have there as well. So with the determinations other than that, putting in more of a questionnaire along the sides of how that's been, for the sides of let me back up. For as waste codes and other materials, that would be put on by the end generator. The person doing the waste pickup requests. If there's additional information that would be needed to make that determination, we could always add that in as well too.
I'll point out too here that in the hazard section, there is some help text to help with making those hazard determinations. and those can be edited. So if the person doing the pickup or the health and safety team disagrees with the hazard determination, they can make those changes. But there is some guiding text here to help the folks that are actually producing the waste to take a first crack at listing what the hazards are.
Yeah, and those are great. The help
Always
text sorry, the help text is coming straight from the EPA RCRA definitions of these items also. So, we're going to hear different ones from they're kind of taught more on the GHS side of things for recognizing hazards, but we wanted to provide that level of education through here as well. Obviously, the definition of corrosive is going to be a little bit different in the different categories also.
And I know that interpretation of when that determination needs to be made can vary from organization to organization as well.
It
So,
can, yeah. So some people have the person doing the, they count them as a generator. Some people count their organization as a generator. So there's a little bit of flexibility of how that's managed also. Exactly.
Thanks, Bill. Staying on this view for the pickup request itself, when people are filling this out, one of the things that might be helpful to mention is how folks indicate the constituents of a pickup and whether or not we can ask them to be very specific, add up to 100% and so on, because I see a comment in the Q&A about the fact that they can't really accept unknown chemicals. And is there a way to block people from trying to submit unknown, like a black box kind of submission for waste pickup?
For an unknown, so there is for these type of areas here, we're adding those materials. It'll start to tell you that when how much of your waste is being declared at that time. So as you're building up your constituents, it'll show you that you're not at 100 or exceeding 100, but it won't necessarily block that from being sent in. It's just a nice indicator when you're actually going to pick that up that, what's missing from here. If there is something like that where they don't know what the material is, they can put that other material, maybe a suggestion of what they might have, but they can also say uncharacterized, unknown, and they or other hazards, which can provide a more descriptive field as well. So they can at least tag it, so the person knowing to go pick it up when they look at that can say, okay, we're gonna have more to do here, right? So just allows for a little bit more of that. If they can't find it, there's also the ability to add unlinked chemicals in here as well, or items that are not part of the databases also.
And if they submit a pickup request that is a little bit helter-skelter and the person who manages pickups is not comfortable or this needs some cleaning, they can always reject the pickup request, right? So while we're not going to block them, there is a way to say, hold your horses. We need to get some more information before we touch whatever's in this container.
Right. It can show that we did our diligence and we wanted to be there, right? We wanted to come in, we wanted to try to get in, or we have more questions. So when we do reject that pickup request, we can actually send them more information about that and say, do we have any other information about that? Can you add that to your additional details or other materials? Give us the best you got, kind of thing, right? And then we can come there and at least plan for that day and bring the right gear with us also.
Thanks, Bill. Do you have any advice for people that are picking up waste in an SAA that has several containers that look very similar? How would they identify which one they're actually going to be picking up? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, so each of these pickup requests are actually done by more of a waste stream kind of format. So that way it'll be really targeted towards the particular bottle or material that would be there. So they can probably match that up with that. One of the cool things they can do as well too, from the pickup request side of things, is not actually have to dive in. So the Adams Lab, they might have a few requests. They can actually pick that up from here, look into what they would have. So if you're looking from a tablet or other areas as well, you can say, this is the specific bottle that I came here for, not just have to dive into the request and look at everything. So there's a little bit more of a highlight view underneath that microscope there.
And each request gets a unique number associated to it. So right at the top there, we saw that one's 1306. So the lab can identify the container in the SAA by that container number. So the person can match those two. So they know which bottle to remove, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. We have good questions trickling in. Yes, so we have one more question about constituents. So folks can look up chemicals by CAS numbers when they're filling out a pickup request, right?
Yes, so you can do quite a few things here. You can do the CAS number or a product name or number. So if it's a more generic product or anything along those lines, it can be typically found within the system also. But you can also add, if something's unlinked, you can also put the more information into there as well. So there's lots of ways to get the information put in based off those searches.
Thank you, Bill. We have another question about pickups where folks might put in an abbreviation or colloquial name or something that's not a complete chemical name. How do you help folks make sure that they're putting in complete information for the folks that manage waste?
Yeah, so we won't really allow it, right? So it's basically going to make you have to pick the name or the synonym of that name when you're putting that in there, right? So we'd see that in a lab where people might write like ETOH on there, right? Because they just don't want to write ethanol for some reason, right? Or different abbreviations, which isn't allowed by a lot of the standards. So we're trying to enforce that as well too, of saying like this is the proper way to actually submit the request. So hopefully it's just reinforcing again that training of how the tag should be filled out also. So it just will not allow it for it to be there based off that information. So you wouldn't be able to abbreviate that, for example.
Thanks, Bill. And if somebody is requesting a pickup for something particularly hazardous, like an expired peroxide former, is there an alert or anything in the system that would let folks know that they're about to handle something that is more hazardous than usual?
Not at the moment, but that is a pretty cool idea. Like that. Yeah, so not at the moment, but that would be something that would be listed here. They could also indicate, for example, if they did have something like that where it'd be ignitable, and if they were kind of curious, they could always write other hazards in as well. So if there's something that might be of concern, like that would be an issue. And the other item that they could do is if they know the lab has certain types of peroxide formers, is actually build different profiles for those groups. All right, so you can actually look into that group or the groups that have the peroxide formers and see when they had the last pickup for that profile. And that would actually kind of give you a good indication that, hey, they didn't do this for a while. Is there something that might be building up, and actually communicate with them? So you can use those profile tools to kind of manipulate or kind of view into when did this last happen, or even filter by, for example, here, filter by the pickup requests and look at your close requests. If you were to have that into a profile or types of material, when was the last time we got these requests in? So if we had that curiosity, we could still find some of that information. Not alert, but that's kind of how you could manipulate it at the moment.
I love that idea.
Thanks. I just thought of it.
We've been talking about waste, but what about the supplies? Can you show how folks might request a delivery of a replacement container when they're requesting waste?
Yeah, so it'll also be indicated on here as well too. So what they're requesting from there, but each of the pickup requests, so for example, would have the ability to indicate that they need supplies. So we can at least remind them if they do have those types of items that might need to be returned to the lab group. So they'll have that on their waste pickup request form. So it'll be there for them as well. And that way you can also, these are also able to be configured per site.
Thanks, Bill. One more question. Is there any way when you're looking at your list of waste requests to remove a request that's no longer needed? Let's say something's rejected and you decide that they're going to just start over, or that's something that they're not actually going to dispose of yet. Do they need to contact support for help with deleting a pickup request?
I think potentially. I haven't heard that question really come up yet, but that is an interesting one to bring back to our feature request queue, I believe. That's kind of the thing, is if we don't want to close it, because then it will add to our potential total amounts, right? So, or add to something that was picked up but actually was not in part of the lab's waste history. That'd be a pretty cool feature request, actually. So thank you.
Currently, they would have to just sort of modify it to be their next request.
Exactly, right. So they would have to be able
Change
to kind of come in and
record.
organize that, yeah. Modify it or not put the information in or close out the constituents or something along those lines to not have it added to the other material.
Yeah, so they would just remove all the chemical related information and then close it as an empty request.
Yeah, that could be the way to do that for now as well. That would work.
Yeah. All right. When folks are out doing pickups in the real world, are they going to do this in a digital manner? Can they print off a list of open pickup requests in case someone really likes to use paper instead of a screen?
Yep. So if
What does it look like for the grunts? Shout out to the grunts.
yeah. Right. So you might want to do that as well too. Or if, like, let's say you did not want to provide a vendor with access to the system overall, right? You wanted to take a look at that, give them the information that they needed to do for today. You can also export that information and it will provide all the details that are associated with that as well. The location, the information, things along those lines for it. So if you did want to still have the clipboard, we can still do it that way. But if you wanted to pull this up on your phone before you go into a specific building, specific space here as well. If I'm going to the Bouchard facility, I can know in real time that I got 2 that are problems, right away before I go in there. Maybe we can help them out. Or I can pull that up based off of the other information. So just kind of helps plan the day to do it from a digital perspective. That way we're not, one of the things that used to really frustrate me is when I went to a building, I'd grab a couple of containers, I'd go back to my MMA, and then I put the containers back, and I get an email while I was out that another 3 bottles, that I could have fit in my cart were requested, right? So now I got to take another trip. And what we really want to do is reduce the likelihood of accidents, injuries, other types of things that could take place with having those multiple trips. So being able to log in and see those types of things in real time just reduces a lot of it. But absolutely, if you want to go to paper, the Excel sheet will work. So you can make the checkbox and then you come back in and do your bulk closeout kind of feature as well. So you can say, I got all of these today that are on that list. So they still manage both ways.
Thanks, Bill. When a pickup request is rejected, what kind of notes are you able to include in the rejected request? Can they include a picture for a rejected waste pickup to say, this is exactly what the problem is, or is it just text-based?
At the moment, it's just text-based for right now. So it'll actually send them an email with a description of what was the issue. So the end user will get that email sent to them directly, and you'll see a notification that it actually went through to them, but it would be text at the moment. Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. We've had a lot of really great questions. I want to
Yeah,
thank
it's
everyone
fun.
who's been filling them in the Q&A. We really love the engagement. If anyone else has any other questions, now's the time. If you have questions that bubble up in your mind after we wrap, we can always follow up offline, and a recording of this will be made available afterward. So you can always revisit this information. And like Bill mentioned, we can schedule a dedicated call with anyone if you would like to talk more. Awesome. Looks like the Q&A has slowed down. Bill and Kimmy, thank you so much. This has been an awesome learning experience.
Thank you.
All right, and everybody keep an eye out for that email and make sure that you register for Lacia's upcoming medical surveillance webinar in December.
Thank you, Kimmy.
We'll see you then.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bill.
everyone.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.